Now you have to push the little button. So we're talking about transforming adversity into the path, and that making adversity the path of awakening is that first slogan. And there are three ways of going about that: relying on relative bodhicitta, on ultimate bodhicitta, and on special practices. Concerning relative bodhicitta, for the first way, drive all blames into one. It is the egoistic mind that is the cause of the suffering, not something out there. Thank goodness, because we can't do very much with what's out there, but we can work with our own minds. The second one of this relative bodhicitta section is be grateful to everyone and everything that arises that gives us opportunities to practice in that way. We'll spend some time talking about that. He says, do not be angry, not even at a dog or an insect. I find dogs and insects actually pretty easy. It's people that are more apt to bring these things up for me. Then those are the two for relative bodhicitta. Then there's the one on ultimate bodhicitta. He says the ultimate protection is emptiness. Know what arises as confusion to be the four aspects of being. Know what arises as confusion to be the manifestation of the Buddha mind. That the source of the clear light mind, if you want to put it that way, the noble Buddha nature, whatever word you may want to use, all of it comes from that, and it manifests as all of this. And if we're seeing what is manifesting as coming initially from that source, then that's the ultimate protection. We don't need to think about rolling all blames into one or any of that. We just say, oh, this is a manifestation of the Buddha. Easy to say. So that's the only one for ultimate bodhicitta in this point. As for the third approach, which are called special practices, the first one is the best way is to use the four practices. And the four practices are accumulating merit, confessing, he uses the word evil actions, those that take us away from they move us towards suffering is a way to think about that. Offering torma is little cakes, to troublemakers, and also the fourth one, offering that to protectors. Those are the four practices he's talking about. Interestingly, Pema Chodron entitles her chapter on these practices, Overcoming Resistance. That we use these practices to let go. The first one is accumulating merit. There's a number of ways of talking about that. The simple way is do wholesome things, do good. The paramita of generosity. You want to be generous. Again, you want to let go. You want to be able to give. Willing to let go of self. There's a surrender aspect to this accumulating merit. It's funny, we're talking about accumulating merit, but we're surrendering. Acts of kindness and compassion, tanglen, and so forth, are all actions that accumulate merit, if you want to put it that way. Pema Chodron says, as a result of opening yourself in this way, you begin to experience your world as more friendly. And the suggestion there is if you're not experiencing the world as a friendly place, and some people living in the same world at the same time experiencing exactly the same things experience it as friendly, and some people experience it as very unfriendly. Why is that? And the suggestion here is you can do this to help move in that direction of actually being present to the friendliness in the world. This may also involve rituals if you're into a spiritual practice that has those, charitable giving, and so on. Traylid Camgun says the 4 practices help us deal with the suffering that comes from misinterpreting adversity and fixating on our misfortunes. And this accumulation of merit, that's for all 4 of these practices, the accumulation of merit is not the accumulation, he says, of something that we can gain or lose, which is the usual Western way of thinking of accumulating something. You put it in a pile over here, and later on you would draw part of it, maybe you give a little away, however it might be. But he says we're accumulating that which can really transform energy. Alan Wallace says merit can be understood as spiritual power. That by engaging in these doing good, wholesome acts, we begin to develop a certain kind of power that helps us move in our practice. And he goes on, we accumulate this kind of energy by engaging in virtuous actions and cultivating wholesome mental states with a kind heart. It's funny, if you're trying to accumulate merit, then you're not. In its pure form, the virtuous actions are done solely for themselves. There is not a thought about trying to accumulate merit, gaining anything whatsoever. It's done completely for the sake of that which you are doing. But whatever it is you're giving, whether it's Tonglen or $50 or whatever it might be, you're just doing it with no thought of anything for yourself. You're not trying to gain anything. You're not expecting payback. You may even want to be anonymous. This paradox shows up repeatedly in the practice, that if we're trying to fill in the blank, get to the first jhana, you never will. You have to let go of the desire. So playing with that paradox, and to bring up the question, as I'm doing this wholesome activity, what is my motivation? How much of that really has to do with wanting to accumulate merit or do good so that it will benefit me in some way? Just to be aware. It's not a critical, judgmental, shaking your finger at yourself kind of thing. It's just an awareness. And you can tell. You know how it feels. I want to bring all the teachers in here. Norman Fischer, cultivate the wholesome. If you're asking if there is something you can do to help, is there anything I can do to help? Make it a real question with the intention of following through behind it, not an appropriate social response. And if you are just doing an appropriate social response and you don't really mean it, just to be aware of that, so we can, see what's happening inside ourselves. So that's the accumulation of merit section in a nutshell. A lot more could be said about it, and volumes have been written on it. And I encourage you to do whatever further investigation you want to do. The next one is called confessing evil actions, or purification of evil actions. And these, again, the evil action is that which leads us towards suffering or results in the suffering of others around us by what we do. When we see we've done those kinds of things, to be aware of that. And how do you know when you've purified whatever that might be? I think I might be using harsh words as an example, but Alan Wallace used one. He says, I love this one. If adultery was the behavior, inappropriate sexual contact of some kind, or behavior of some kind, it has been purified when there is no longer any tendency toward adultery, just as a tiger will decline a bale of hay for dinner. So when you find that that which had been so powerful is suddenly, I know this is it won't taste good, it won't be a nutritious thing for me, like a tiger being presented with a bale of hay. I like that example. As I was thinking about this, I also was aware that how much of this is in the 12-step program, for those of you that might be familiar with it. Step 4, I made a searching, fearless moral inventory. You can do this practice as confessing of evil, so to speak, or unskillfulness might be a better word. As you go along, you also can sit down with it and say, let me review, let me just have a look, let me look back, let me do an inventory, just so I'm clear with myself. And I'm not trying to kid myself or brush anything under the rug. So that step 5, admitted in the 12-step program to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. It's kind of a continuing process from 4. In this practice, it is really to yourself. And if you want to, in one of the books, it suggests you're doing this before all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, present, and future. But you don't need to do that. You're just really being clear with yourself, as specifically as you can. The 8th step is making a list of persons that we have harmed, become willing to make amends. Again, makes perfect sense. I mean, it's just, if we've hurt somebody, is there a way we can make amends? Is there something we can do? If there is, we do it. If there's not, we can do Tonglen at least. And the 10th is to continue to take that inventory. So I really think it's interesting that there are at least 4 of the 12 steps are focused on this practice in the 12-step program. It also has little sections. How do you confess evil? How do you confess your unskillfulness? To really make a practice of it. And the first aspect is regret. This is in Pema Chodron's book, if you want to read it, it's all there. Regret. Yes, I have done something that's unskillful. The time to really be open with yourself. To note I did it on account of this. It actually had some reason to it. There might be a little bit of rationalization about it, maybe minimizing. Just let all that go. Yes, I did that. I regret that. I was unskillful. And it has to do with craving and aversion. It has to do with that which defines the ego. There's a lot of talk about what's the difference between guilt and regret. And guilt seems to have a circle to it. It just keeps on going. And it says, I'm bad. Regret says, I was unskillful. I wished I hadn't done that. And I will make whatever amends I can make. The next section is refraining. I'm not going to do that again. You set that intention, Pema Chodron again, talking from her, without the expectation of perfection. You set the intention, I'm not going to use harsh words anymore. I can see that when I use harsh words, it really causes pain and suffering for myself and the other person. It drives us further apart. It makes each of us more solid and separate, and it doesn't soften the boundaries, it increases them. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to eat any more rich foods because I know it's not good for my stomach and I'm overweight. So I really have the intention, but I'm not expecting perfection. So on the one hand, not to expect perfection is a very positive thing. On the other hand, it can be a slippery slope. Oh, well, kind of screwed up again. So we want to be very careful with that part of it. The third one is remedial action. Again, already talked about it. What can you actually do? And some of the remedial action that is mentioned by her and others is to cultivate wisdom in the situation. Take refuge in your inner wisdom. Take refuge in the Sangha that you're a part of. Take refuge in the teachings. Practice Tonglen. Practice loving kindness. If there's nothing you can do directly. She has a fourth stage, but it sounds very much to me like, again, resolving not to repeat it. So I'm not sure what her point was. Maybe somebody can enlighten me about that. And that becomes a regular part of what we do. So in this taking adversity as the path, well, I should mention the other two. We're offering torma to the demons. We're offering little cakes to the troublemakers, which are sometimes talked about as these unreasonable feelings, that sometimes they arise because we see a cause, sometimes they arise because they just arise. That is kind of a surprise. Oh my God, I can't believe how mad I got so quickly. And the harsh words just came out. So in the offering of torma here, there's a middle way of, on the one hand, not acting when you can avoid it on these unreasonable feelings. If you have the spaciousness to say, oh, I need to keep my mouth shut right now, can be a part of this. But also not at all denying or minimizing that this is there. I was thinking about our good buddy Milarepa, walking back into his cave that was full of demons, which I think of on a regular basis. And as you may recall, it wasn't until he said, okay, you're not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. Open the refrigerator, take what you want, torma, whatever, hang out, whatever. And they all leave except one. And what does he do with the one? He puts his head inside the mouth of the demon and says, go ahead. And it occurred to me just this time as I looked at that he was offering himself as the torma. He was offering himself as the sweet cake to this demon, who then, of course, left. And the other offering of torma is to the protectors, who show up as the wrathful deities in Buddhist iconography, and you may have seen them on these tankas, especially the Tibetan ones, with their eyes are huge and they're fierce looking and they have flames and they're, whoa, they're frightening creatures indeed, the wrathful deities. And they're saying, no. The way Pema Chodron puts it is, the reason they appear so wrathful is that they are not going to buy that stuff. What stuff? Aggression, anxiety, unkindness, jealousy. When that arises, they're just not going to sit by. And then she asks, and who is it that's not going to buy that stuff? In truth, it's your own wisdom. As our capacity to see when we're moving in the direction of unskillfulness increases, when we're seeing it coming more and more, this is the wisdom that comes up and says, no, there is another way. How do I want to be in this moment? That is not how I want to be. There is a powerful, when you get so sick and tired of doing it in the way that has caused you repeated suffering, there comes a point when you just say, no, I'm just not going to do it anymore. And that's the embodiment of that, according to Pema Chodron and some others. So the no can be quite loud and quite forceful. And it is to these protectors that we are making our offering of gratitude, asking them to be there for us. So those are the 4 practices that are a part of this taking adversity as the path. And the last one, and I know, well, I'll just make a short work of this and leave some time for some sharing. Work with whatever you encounter immediately. We just talked about that. Anger arises, harsh words are present, you can see them in the back of your mind, and something says, no. You're working with it immediately. But this says, make that your intention, that whatever arises, we work with it immediately. If joy arises, be present to it immediately. You may wish inside yourself, this joy that I'm experiencing, may all beings experience this joy. And on the other hand, if what's arising is an unpleasant feeling state, emotion, an adverse emotion of some kind, the process is with our meditation, we are creating increasing space. And with the intention that I'm going to notice when that happens, and the spaciousness that may be there at least at times, that allows us to say, okay, how do I want to be here? And then use the practice that is going to be the most helpful. So when it arises, I think we've all been there. Oh, yeah, I did it again. I wish I hadn't raised my voice, but I did. And we're sitting there. I think I'll use this on the mat a bit. I'll have a look at this. I'll bring it back up. We may explore it in that way. We may make that, I'm going to make a resolution. I'm not going to do that again. I have the intention set. But the real power happens when we can do it at the time immediately. Right then. And we bring the practice to it right now. Work with whatever we encounter immediately. So to do that, we have to recognize that these things are going to happen by surprise. We're not going to get hey, Ken, you got one coming down the line in about 30 seconds. It's going to be some anger here. Get ready. That doesn't happen. Suddenly, boom, you're faced with it. To have the intention and the practice, there it is, and you don't just go into the old habit energy, but have that moment. Say, okay, how do I want to practice right now? How do I want to encounter this? Is the practice of working with whatever you encounter immediately, as I see it. I think it's an advanced aphorism because we can't do it unless we've created a fair amount of space for ourselves, that we've developed a fair amount of substance to our intentions, and that we renew them on a regular basis. If we've not been setting that intention, thinking about these things, expecting them really, and when they arise, suddenly they arise and gone, and we've already reacted. So I'll stop talking. And we can turn to the sharing in the little less than 20 minutes we have left, and I will stop the recording.